So a lot of the people who've been watching my channel have been asking for a responsive menu tutorial. So we're going to do one today, and I'm just going to start off by talking a little bit about what kind of responsive menu. I'm going to show off what exactly we're going to be building. So this is going to be a responsive menu tutorial with a drop-down, a search field, and a couple of links that you can click inside of it. The drop-down will be responsive as well, just to mention it, because that is a specific thing that people have been asking for. How do you make a drop-down inside a responsive menu? So let me go ahead and just show off what exactly I have so far. So if I were to open up my website, I'm just going to take it over just a little bit so you can see the drop-down here. I'm just going to make a basic menu, so to speak. And as you can see, I have a basic logo, which is just a placeholder for now. So you can just insert your own logo if you want to do that. We do also have a menu that has some sort of hover effect. So if I were to go over here, you can see that we have some things going on, including a drop down. So if I were to go down here, you can see that we can select different things inside the drop down. I know some of these items here are kind of like repeating themselves. I just kind of wanted to show you that you can also do this using a lot of items when it comes to the responsive version. We do also have a search field in case you want to include some PHP inside your website and you want to have some, something you can search for. If you do not want to have that, you can just not have the search field in here, just leave it out, and it's still going to work the same way. And then of course, a couple of social media links, since I know that is kind of like the popular thing to have inside a website. So just to show you what this looks like inside the responsive version. So if I were to go inside my developer tool, either you can click F12 or you can right click and go down and say inspect, or inspect element if you're inside Chrome. And inside your developer tool, you're going to have a button somewhere in the top. On Firefox, it's going to be over here on the right side. I know on Chrome, it's going to be over here on the left side, where you can go in and go inside the responsive design mode. So if we were to click this and just close this down for now, you can see that we have this responsive design where this is the mobile version. If you've never seen this tool before, by the way, this is a great way to test out your mobile version, so you don't have to like upload to an online web server somewhere and have to check it on your phone all the time. So this is a great way to just kind of test things out. So what I can do is I can select the kind of phone that I want to use. Do keep in mind that if you select one of these and swap them, you will need to actually go in and refresh the page. In some cases like Chrome, you will also need to go in and actually close down this little developer tool window. So you actually close it down, refresh the page, and then you open it up again by clicking F12. So you will have to do that if you swap the different viewports that we have in here. In my case here, I just picked something very standard. So I picked iPhone 12/13 Plus Pro. And then you can see I have a mobile version in here. If I were to go in and actually click this burger menu, you can see that we now get a menu that pops up on screen. So we can actually choose things that we want to click on. And of course, you can go in and you can actually close it down again just by clicking this burger menu here. So we can open and close this one. If I were to go down, you can see we can't really scroll for now. But if I were to click the gallery button, which is the drop down menu, I do want to show you something in here which is a little bit different on Firefox from Chrome, because right now if I click, you can see it doesn't really open, even though it's supposed to. And that is because we have this little button up here called Disable Touch Simulation. So if we were to click this one, you can now see this is how the drop down is going to look like when you click it. And then I can scroll down, you can see all the different drop down items are going to be inside this drop down. There are many ways to create a drop down menu, by the way. I choose to go the route that is using less JavaScript, because I know people specifically ask me not to use too much JavaScript, because we can't avoid JavaScript 100%. We do need to add just a little bit of JavaScript to open the menu here. But that's pretty much it. We don't need to add anything else. And this is literally just a couple of lines of code. And then you have it opening and closing. So if you're okay with having just a teeny bit of JavaScript, then everything is going to work out perfectly, just like it is on screen here. But do know that you cannot avoid not using JavaScript unless you want to, have a mobile menu that is always visible. So if it has to hide like we do right here, then you do need a little bit of JavaScript. I do also want to mention here, because I know some people may have a question about this right now, everything fits perfectly inside this menu here, inside the mobile version. So right now you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different menu items. And if I were to squeeze in a fifth menu item, this is all going to adjust accordingly. So everything is just going to adjust itself according to how many menu list items that you have inside your website. So you don't need to worry about, well, okay, so I have 4 or like 7 menu items. So do I need to change something inside the code here? You do not. Everything is just working out perfectly. Okay. But you can also see that the search field and the social media buttons are here, the logo is up here, so everything is working out fine, and this is the mobile version. So to close this down again, I'm just going to open up my developer tool and click on my little device mode up here, or responsive design mode. And then I'm just going to close it down, and then you can see, it does require kind of a refresh here, but then you can see this is the normal version again. So just to kind of summarize here, this is kind of going to be a complete menu we're going to create, and you can just not have a search field or social media links if you don't want to have that. You can just not have it inside your HTML, and everything should fit in accordingly and just readjust itself. We will also make it responsive. We're also going to include as little JavaScript as possible, because I know a lot of beginners, they are a little bit scared of JavaScript, which is understandable if you're not used to a programming language, but we're not going to have too much of it. So just kind of like follow step by step what I'm writing. I will explain it as I'm doing it, what it does, and everything should be perfectly fine. I do also want to mention one more thing in terms of how I'm going to show you how to do this, because I have taught a lot over the years, and I just know that some teaching methods are not as good as others. So the way that I'm going to do things is that I will go ahead and include a block of CSS code. So like a styling for one HTML element, I will put it inside my CSS file, and then I'll just explain what everything does inside that one block of code. Then we'll paste in the next block, and I'll explain that block of code instead of me sitting here writing and explaining at the same time, because that is taking too long, and this is going to be a long video. So why not cut it down as much as possible with unnecessary typing, so to speak. The last thing I want to mention here is that if you are a channel member or a Patreon, then of course you can gain access to all my personal files that I'm sitting with in front of me here, as well as a version where I did actually go in and write notes everywhere inside the code, so you can actually see what exactly each piece of code does. So if you want to have access to my personal files, then I will have that available to all my different channel members. And the way you can get access to that is, of course, by going inside the description and going down to the bottom of it. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into this lesson here and actually get started on making this menu. So as you can see right now, this is what we have, because you have not started anything yet. And we will do this completely from scratch. So if I go inside my project here, you can see that I have a very basic project with a index file and a style sheet. So I have a index.html, which right now just have the basic HTML that you need to have in order to get started here. Of course, there is a shortcut inside most text editors. In case of my editor here, I'm using Visual Studio Code. So if you go in and type HTML, you can see you get this little HTML5. You click it, and then it creates all the code for you. So it's very easy just to create the same thing that I have up here. The only thing that I have that you do not have when you do that is these 2 lines of code here, which is just basically to my style sheets. So I do have a reset style sheet, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically a way to reset all the styling inside all the different browsers that are out there. So if you don't know what a reset style sheet is and you want to have one, then I do have a tutorial on how to just very quickly set that up. Which I will link in the description, so you can go and do that. But then I do also have my own style sheet, which is called style.css, which is inside here. And as you can see, there's nothing in here because we haven't done anything yet. So we need to do everything from scratch. You may also have noticed that I have 2 different folders inside my project here, besides these 3 files that I just mentioned. So I do have a fonts folder where I have many different fonts that you can use inside your website. Of course, you can use any kind of font that you want to. If you just want to use one of the default ones that are available, from the beginning without having to import any sort of new fonts, then you can do that. In my case here, I'm using Roboto, which is a very popular font that you can download off of Google for free. And I will also have a link for that particular font if you want to download it and do the same thing as I'm doing here. Or you could also just download my lesson material, and then you'll have all these fonts as well. But like I said, these are all free. So, you can just go into Google and just download them, and then create a folder and just put them all in there. So you have all the fonts available to you. I do also have a image folder. As you can see here, I do have some images, and just to show exactly what that looks like. So this is my project. Yeah, I can go inside my image folder, and then you can see I have 5 different images. I have a burger bar. I do also have a Instagram logo, a YouTube logo, a search icon, and I do also have a placeholder logo. So again, if I were to go back inside my website here, you can see that I have the placeholder icon. I have some Instagram, some YouTube, the search icon over here. So just some basic icons for us to use. And of course, if you go inside the mobile version, then the burger bar in the top corner is going to be the burger bar icon. And again, all these different icons you can download for free by going to this website, which is called flaticon.com, where you can download free icons. So if I were to go in here and say burger menu, then you can see that we get many different icons. You can just click on one of them and then say download over here as a PNG, and then you'll have an icon. So I found all my different icons using this website here. So that is a way for you to get access to these icons, or again, you can download my lesson material and you'll have all the different icons that I'm using inside a image folder inside the project. So now going back inside our website here, let's go ahead and get started by actually creating things inside our index.html. Now you know what I have so far, which is pretty bare bone, just an image folder with images, some fonts. I have an index page, a reset style sheet, and a regular style sheet, and that is all I have. So let's start by going down inside our body menu and actually start creating some of the different items that we need in order to create this menu bar at the top of the website. So what I'll do is I'll start by creating a header, because we do need to have a header element in order to create a header for our website. Inside this header, I'm going to go and create a nav element, and inside the nav element is going to be where we have our navigation. So our header is going to have two sections. It's going to have the navigation on the left side. Again, I can just kind of show this off here inside the finished version. So this is the navigation over here, and then we have a social media box over here on the side. So going back inside our HTML, this is going to be the navigation on the left side. Then I'll go down and create a div tag for the right side, which is going to have all the social media. So what I'll do is I'll start by filling out our navigation. So there's going to be some things in here, for example, a logo. So I'm going to create a container called logo. This is going to have a class. It's going to be called logo. And inside of here, we're going to have a image element. So we can actually include a logo image that we want to use inside our website. Now, some of you may question, why am I putting a single image element inside a div container? And that is because when we start creating the mobile version, we do need to create spacing around this image here, and the best way to do that is by using a div container wrapped around the image. So what I'll do here is I'll go in and actually find my image. So I have my image folder here. So I'll say I have a image folder, and then I'll say that I want to go inside this image folder and grab my logo, the PNG, and then I'll of course create a alt attribute here where I explain what is inside of here. So I'll say website logo, or if you have a name for your website, that would be the name for your website. So with this, we now have a logo, and what I'll do is I'll create our navigations. So I'll go below our div tag and say we have a unordered list. And yes, I am one of those people who create menus by creating unordered list. Of course, if you want to change things, you can do that. I just think it's a little bit easier when we do unordered list in this example here. So what I'll do is I'll go in here, create a list item, and create a anchor tag. Say anchor tag, there we go. And inside of here, I'm just going to go ahead and say home. So we have some sort of text for this particular anchor tag. And I'm going to go ahead and link to our front page. So I'm going to say index.html, just so we have a link to somewhere. Then I'm going to copy this down. So we have another one, and I'm going to call this one something like gallery, which in our case is going to be our drop down. So we will have to change this a little bit later on. But for now, let's just go ahead and finish off our menu here. So we have something. So we're going to go down again, just copy down a couple of times. In my case, I will have 5 different menu items. So the third one is going to be portfolio. Then I'll also create one for about me. And then I'll create one called contact. Just so we have a little bit of menu items here. I will also go ahead and leave all these different links here just empty. So we're just going to go ahead and say hashtag here. So we have something that doesn't lead anywhere. Again, this is a placeholder link. If you don't know where they're going to go for now, because I might not have a portfolio page yet, then I can just leave this in for it to not do anything basically. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and create our drop down menu. So the way you do that is by actually going down to the next line with your list item tag. So you'll see I have my opening list item, and then I have my anchor tag here. And then before I close off my list item, I'm going to go inside of here, create another unordered list, go inside of here and create another list item with a anchor tag. So we have some drop down menu items inside of here. So in this case here, I do have a bunch here just as a placeholder. I'll just copy in some of them. So I'll say I have 5. I'll just copy them in here, and you can just, pause the video, type them in if you want to, it's a bit faster for me just to copy paste. So going down, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with this social media container, which is going to be on the right side of our header. So going in here, I'm going to give this one a class. I'm going to call it SM for social media. What I'll do here is I'll go in and create my search field. Again, if you do not want to have a search field inside your website, just leave this out and not include it. In my case here, I do want to add it in. So what I'll do is I'll create a method inside this particular, inside the form element. So I'll just go ahead and say this is going to be a post method. And I'm just going to open up my search field. And inside of the search field, I'm going to include some input. So I want to have a input for the actual search field. This is going to be a text type. Inside of it, I'm going to create a name attribute. So we can actually grab this data when you actually search for something. Again, we're sort of like doing things here that is kind of like the beginning steps if you were to be able to write a little bit of PHP code. But again, this is all like, it's not going to do anything right now inside the website. It's just going to be there, but you can't actually search for something because we need to have a little bit of PHP in order to do that. And I will have a PHP tutorial at some point that shows you how to create this search field so it actually works inside your website. So for now, let's just go ahead and create the search field. And if you want to have a actual search field that works inside your website, then I will have a separate tutorial in the future. So going inside of here, we're going to create a name attribute. This is just going to be called search, just so we have something. And I'll go ahead and create a placeholder. So we have something inside the search field as well. I'm just going to say search ... just so we have something. Then I will go ahead and go down to the next line here. And I'm going to go and create an actual button. So we have something to actually press inside the search field. So in this case here, I do actually want to include a image. I will go ahead and put this one as type equal to submit. And inside the actual button, instead of writing, search. So we have something to actually press. You could also write go, if that makes sense. I will actually go and include a image. And as you may know, inside my image folder, I do already have a search image. So what I can do here is I can say I want to grab that image. So I'll go inside my image folder and I want to grab my search.png. And then of course, I'm going to go ahead and give it a kind of description. So search button, just so we have something for, describing this image in here. So now we have a search button, and as you can see, things are starting to kind of go off screen here. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap everything. So everything goes down on the next line. So, you can actually see what is going on. If you don't know the shortcut, it is going to be Alt-Z in order to do that. Or you can go inside View, go down to Word Wrap, and then you can see it's right there. So, so you can actually see what is going on here. But this is basically all we need to have for now when it comes to the search field. Of course, my action here is empty because we don't actually have any sort of file that we're, running some PHP code inside of. So it's just going to be empty for now as a placeholder. And what I'll do is I'll go below the form and I'll create a div, which is going to be a container for the social media icons that I want to have in here. So I'm going to go and create a class. So I'm going to say class, and this is going to be equal to sm-links for social media links, of course. Then I'm going to go inside of here and actually link to my images. So I'm going to say we have an image. I want to take it to my image folder here, and I want to grab my, in this case, it could be Instagram. And then I can say Instagram logo or link or something. Maybe link is a little bit better. So we can say Instagram link, like so. And then I can copy it down to the next line and actually go in and say YouTube.png and then say YouTube link. And this is everything that we need to have for now. We do need to include 2 more things in here in order to actually get the burger menu working. But for now, let's not do that and just continue inside our style sheet. Because now, if I were to actually open this up inside my website, you can see we have something going on in here. But it doesn't look very good. So we do need to do something here to actually change how things look like, because this is not how it needs to look like. So going back inside our editor, I'm going to go inside my style sheet, and I'm just going to go ahead and take everything from the beginning and just kind of tell you what we're going to style first, and then just chronologically go downwards, and I'll explain everything as I'm actually pasting it in and showing it to you. So to begin with, let's go ahead and import in a couple of fonts that we want to use inside our website. Now, if you know a little bit about importing fonts, basically you write this at font face, and then you open up the curly brackets, and then you want to include 2 different information. You want to have the actual font family name that you're giving it. This is something you can call something. So I could call this one, Roboto Burp. if I want to do that, and that would be something we could refer to. But in this case here, this is just going to be the regular Roboto font. So I'm just going to call it Roboto. Then the source is going to lead inside my fonts folder. So again, if I were to just say source : URL and then go inside and actually fetch it. So I can go inside my fonts folder. You can see it pops up here. I can click it and then choose my font. So in this case here, it's Roboto regular. And then we get that. And then I basically just imported 2 other versions, which is going to be the medium version and the bold version. So we actually have a couple of different to choose from. So with the fonts pasted in here, the next thing I want to do here is I want to set a variable, and CSS variables is something that I do have a lesson on if you want to learn how to create variables inside CSS. Basically, if you want to have the same value inside multiple places inside your CSS code, then creating a variable is a way for you to go in and create a value that you can reuse again and again just by referring to a specific name. So in this case here, if I refer to menu count, then it's always going to refer to 5. So if I were to go inside my CSS somewhere and I need to use the letter 5, then I can just refer to menu-count and then I get 5. So it's a way for us to go in and say that, okay, so when I go inside my mobile version, then right now inside my index.html, I have 5 different menus. So you can see I have 2 up here and then I have 3 down here if we don't count the drop down. So that is the number 5 because I have 5 menus. If you go inside your website and you add a 6th menu, so let's say you have 6 now, then of course you would also need to go in here and change this to 6. And that is basically all you need to do to make this adjust itself according to your website if you have less or more menu points that I have, in order to get everything working like it needs to. So with that said, we have this variable here, and I did include this variable inside the root element of my website, which means that this is going to be inside the actual HTML tag that we have up here. So that's where I'm placing this variable. So all the other elements inside the HTML tag can gain access to this variable here. So that is, again, I have a tutorial on this if you want to see exactly what a variable is, but this is basically what we're doing here. This is the only advanced thing we're going to do in this tutorial here. So if you don't know what a variable is yet, don't get scared off, because this is basically all we're going to do when it comes to unknown concepts that you may not know about. So with this, let's go down to the next line and actually style our body tag. I do like to have a different background color. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a body element styling and go in and change the background color. So again, if I were to go inside the website here, you can see that now I have a dark background. So we can actually see the menu inside our website. Going back inside the styling here, the next thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that we style our header. So we do have a little bit of header styling here. Just going to paste it in so you can see it here. All we're doing here is giving it a width of 100%. So it goes all the way across the screen. Then we're giving it a padding of 60 pixels from the left and right side to make sure that everything inside the menu has a little bit of spacing away from the edges of my screen, so they're not touching up against the sides of my website. And then I'm also giving it a height. So we have a height inside this website menu here. So, it's not completely flat inside the screen, as well as giving it a background color of white so we can actually see the actual menu inside this dark background that I just created. And we're also going to go ahead and use Flexbox in order to actually place the elements inside our header. So we can actually have, the actual navigation on the side, and then we have the social media on the other side. So in order to do that, we're going to be using Flexbox, which again, I do also have a tutorial on inside my channel. So if you want to know about Flexbox, I will also leave a link for that if you want to. But for now, just know that we're using Flexbox. We do also want to make sure we justify the content with space between. So we have everything shifting to the sides up the edge of the screen, so we actually have them over there. And I do also want to add a position fixed and set a top to 0. This is basically allowing for the header to stick to the top of the site. So when I scroll down inside my website, we can always see the menu at the top there. So that is something that we usually tend to do inside our website. So the menu doesn't disappear up in the top of the screen when we start scrolling down inside the page. And I did also went ahead and gave it a set index as 100 to make sure that we can always see the header inside the website. So it goes on top of everything when we start scrolling down inside the web page. And before we go inside the browser to see how this looks like, we do actually need to do one more thing, which is to copy my class name here and go back inside the index file, go down to our header and actually add a class called header-main because we forgot to do that, or I forgot to do that. That's on me because I was telling you what to do. But basically doing that and going back inside our website, you can see that now we have this menu bar at the top here. Now everything inside is still messed up, but that is going to get styled in just a second. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and style the actual nav tag inside this header here. So I'm going to just paste in my nav tag styling. And again, we're just kind of doing this as a flex styling to make sure that all the items are going next to each other inside this nav container that we created. So doing that, going back inside the website and refreshing, you can see that everything is kind of like jumping next to each other up here. Now we can't really see it because it's still kind of like, you know, if I were to zoom in here just to make sure you can actually see things, it is still kind of not viewable. So we do need to add a little bit more styling. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to style the logo container. So as you may remember, inside the HTML file, we added a container for the logo. So what I'll do is I'll add that in. And all I'm doing here is I'm setting a height. I am setting the width of this particular container to the width of the content inside of it, which is in this case the logo image. And I'm also aligning it to the center of the actual navigation bar. So inside my header up here, we do have a height of 60 pixels because that is what we added in up here when we set a height for this header. And I do want to make sure that my logo is actually centered inside this, you know, of the vertical axis of the header. So to do that, when you're using Flexbox, you do need to add a align self center in order to do that. I did also go ahead and add in a cursor, which is set to pointer. So we do actually have a hand cursor when we try to click on this logo up here because it should take us somewhere if we wanted to. Right now inside the index.html, I can actually see that we did not do that. So if you wanted to, you could also change this one to an anchor tag and actually link it to somewhere, and that would actually work. So let's actually go and do that. So we're going to say hyperreference, and I'm going to link this one to index.html, and that will work the exact same way. So now we do actually have this logo that we can click on in order to take us to the front page of the website. The last thing we're going to do is style the actual image inside this container here. So I'm just going to paste in some styling, and that is just going to be the height of the image, so it actually fits inside this image container that we created. So I'm going to save all of this, go back inside my website, and then refresh it. And as you can see, we start getting some things over here that kind of start matching up a little bit, so it doesn't look as messy inside the website. The next thing, of course, is that we do need to start styling the actual menu over here because the menu is kind of messed up. It's just kind of like up against the logo and just not next to each other and that kind of thing. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and style the actual unordered list. So as you can see, I went ahead and gave it a height. I gave it a padding. I did also give it a list style set to none, which I do think we do already have, but let's just go and add it inside our style sheet because the reset style sheet may have removed that for us. I did also went ahead and gave it a align self to center to make sure, again, it is centered vertically inside this Flexbox container. So when we did that, you can see that going back inside the website, refreshing, that now things are starting to go next to each other. Again, things are still looking a bit weird because the drop down is still visible, which it should not be. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and style the actual anchor tags inside these different list items that we have inside this menu here. So as you can see, I went ahead and gave all of these different anchor tags a display as block, as well as giving them a padding to make sure that we had a little bit of distance on the left and the right side of these different menu items. I did also give them a height as 100%, so they actually fit inside this particular container that we have for the navigation. I did also give them a line height of 60 pixels. This is one that I set for 60 because right now the actual header has a height as 60 pixels. So if you do that and give it a line height set to 60 pixels and the height is 60 pixels, then it will center the text inside of it because that is how line height works. I did also went ahead and styled the actual font in here. So you can see we have a font size, a font family. I used the new font that I actually imported inside the website. I did also give it a font color, a background color. I transformed the text to uppercase so it actually looked like uppercase inside the menu. And I did also add a cursor, which is set to pointer. So we can actually see this is a link when we try to put the cursor on top of it. And I did also include a transition, and that is going to be for when we do actually have a hover effect, because when I hover on top of it, I do want to change the background color and the color of the text. So doing that, I can actually go down and add my hover effect. So when I hover on top of this menu item, then I change the background color, and I do also change the color of this particular menu. So saving this, going back inside the website, you can now see that it looks a little bit different. You can see we have a hover effect when I start hovering on top of things, but we do also have a little bit of weirdness going on still, which is of course because everything is not fitting properly yet. So now let's go ahead and fix the drop-down issue, because right now the drop-down is just kind of messing everything up inside this menu here, and we do want to have it hidden to begin with when we do actually refresh the page, because the drop-down should only be visible when you take your mouse cursor and put it on top of the actual menu item, and then the drop-down should pop up, right? So let's go ahead and style that right now. You can actually go ahead and just create a small comment here where we can say drop-down styling, just so we know exactly what is below here. You can say start, just so we know that the drop-down starts here. Then I'm going to go below here, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of styling to hide the actual drop-down. So as you may know, inside the unordered list, inside the list item, we added another unordered list. So going back inside the HTML, you can see we have the unordered list, the list item, and then I added another unordered list to create the drop-down. So that is what we're targeting right now. And what I'm doing is I'm basically going in and saying it should be hidden. The opacity should be 0, and I want to set it to a display none to just completely remove it from inside my website when I refresh the browser and actually just load up the web page for the first time. I did also went ahead and gave it a position set to absolute to position it inside the actual list item. And I did also went ahead and pushed it back a little bit to make it line up right below inside my gallery menu item, so it is properly aligned inside the web page. I can show you afterwards why exactly I put this in here, just to sort of show you. And then you can also see I added a transition, because I do want to make sure that when I put my mouse cursor on top of it, just like when it came to the other menu items, I do want to have a hover effect. So if I were to save this and go back inside my website just to kind of show you, you can see that now we have this one hidden. We can't actually see the drop down, which is what we wanted to have. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to style the actual anchor tags inside this drop down menu. So I'm going to go down and paste in a little bit of styling for the anchor tag. And I'm going to set this one to white dash space is going to be equal to no wrap. And the reason I'm doing that is because if I were to not have this, actually, let's go ahead and for now just comment this out so I can show exactly what it does, because it will pop up in just a second here. So what I'll do is I will create a hover effect. So when I hover on top of my gallery button, the drop down should actually be visible. And the simple way to do that is just simply going in and actually styling the list item that I want to have this drop down actually pop up inside of. So basically we're going in and saying we have a unordered list, and inside of that one we have a list item, and when I hover on top of that one, then I want the direct unordered list inside this list item to have a styling. So I'm going to set the visibility to visible, opacity to 1 so we can actually see it, and I'm going to set it to display block so we actually have it not being display hidden. So right now, as you can see inside the styling up here, we're basically doing the opposite of these 3 lines of code right here in order to actually show it inside the drop down. So saving this, going inside the website, refreshing, you can now see that we have a drop down. I do want to point something out here, which is that you may have noticed that our little logo over here has disappeared, and that is because I'm actually zoomed in to 150% inside my browser here. That is because I'm using a larger resolution monitor than you are, so for it not to be too small when you're watching this video, I actually went ahead and zoomed in so you can see things. If I zoom back out, you can see that things are popping up again, but it still does look a little bit, weird, things are not aligned, but that will get fixed. Just know that as soon as we start changing the sizing of these images over here, things will start looking good again when I'm zoomed in. So let's make it like this for now, so you're not confused. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create another comment, just so we know exactly that this is where the dropdown ends. So we can say end. So we know this is where the dropdown styling, stops inside our code. We could also say stop. That may make more sense. And below here, I'm going to style the social media side of my header. So we actually have everything fitting like it's supposed to be. So as you can see, I'm targeting my header main and the social media div container inside this particular header here. And I'm going to align everything to self. And I'm also going to display it as flex, because we're using flexbox again to push everything next to each other, and then also aligning everything vertically to the center inside of it. So saving this, going back inside, you can see that things are just kind of aligning a little bit. Everything is kind of like trying to fit in here, but it can't quite do it. So going back inside my styling, we're going to start by styling the form that we created. So again, we're styling the form. I'm just basically giving it a height of 40 pixels because I think that's a good size compared to the 60 pixels of my header that is in here. So, for the form not to take up 100% because that would look weird. I did also give it a padding right to make sure there was a little bit of spacing between the form and the social media icons on the right side. I gave it a display as flex, again, to place everything next to each other according to how I think it should look like. I gave it a border, so we have a little bit of a border inside the form to make sure that we can see the form, because when you add a reset style sheet, it actually removes all the different borders and everything and the focus of the form as a default. So this reset style sheet over here is doing a little bit of chaos, which we do need to fix. So by adding in the border, we can go ahead and reapply, a border to this form here. I did also went ahead and gave it a border radius to make sure it had a little bit of some curving around the corners, as well as telling it to actually go in and fit everything inside the width of this form. So the actual input and the button that I have inside the form are going to go next to each other. And then I want the form to wrap around the exact width of these particular inner child elements. I did also went ahead and center this vertically. So we have the form actually centered inside the header. And saving this, going back inside the website, you can now see that things are looking a little bit better. So now we have the form over here. And for now, the image is not styled, so we do need to do that as well. But let's go ahead and start by styling the actual form elements, or the child elements. So we're going to start by styling the input. I'm going to give it a height as 100% of this particular form element we just styled. I'm also going to give it a width of 300 pixels, so it's not too big or not too small, as well as giving it a padding just to give it a little bit of spacing. So when we start writing inside the form, the text is not going to touch the side of my input, which is not looking really good. I did also give it a border radius, so we have some curving on the corners, as well as a little bit of text styling just to make sure that everything looks a little bit decent when it comes to the actual text we're writing inside the input. I will also go ahead and add a focus to this immediately, because when you click inside the input here to write something inside the form, I do want to make sure that we have a little bit of a visual element to show us that, oh, you selected the form now. So we're going to add a focus to this input to make sure that when I click it, it's going to have a dark border to show that I have clicked this input. And just to end it off here, let's go ahead and actually style the button, because we do have a huge image inside this button here, and I do want this to look properly when we start refreshing the website the next time. So what I'll do is I'll add some styling for the button. I'm just going to give it a width set to fit content and a padding to make sure it's rounded in the right places. And I'm also going to go ahead and add in a styling for the image, because we have a image inside this button here, which is the little search image, the little magnifying glass, so to speak. So I'll give it a height as 24 pixels, a padding to the top, as well as a cursor set to pointer. And then by doing that, going back inside the website, you can now see that everything looks like this. A basic form where we have a little bit of padding from the text, because that's what we added in. We can start writing things, and then you can see we can click search in order to actually search for something. And we do also have a dark border going around when we actually select the form. So you can see we have an indicator to show that I have selected the input, and that's what we did with the focus that we included. So now we just need to add 2 more blocks of styling to actually style this over here, because we still have a little bit of social media chaos going on. So going back inside, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in a block of styling for the social media links that we have in here. So right now you can see that we're trying to style the actual container for these 2 social media icons that we have over on the side, because inside the index page we have the actual container with the form and the social media links inside of them. So you can see we have the form, and then we do also have a container for the actual links down here. So that is what we're styling right now. And basically we're just giving it a height as 60 pixels. We could also say 100% if you wanted to do that. I did also give it a width set to fit content, to fit with the icons inside of here, because if I were to add more than just one icon, I can just go and do that, and then it's just automatically going to fit with the content. So if you have more than just Instagram and YouTube, let's say you also want to add a TikTok or something, then you can add that in and it's just going to auto adjust to it. I did also make it a flex container, and I also set all the items to align to the center inside this flex container. And then the last thing we're going to style here is we're going to style the actual images. And basically we're just setting a height, we're setting a margin left to make sure there's a little bit of spacing between the icons. We're also going to set the cursor to pointer, so I can actually click these images in here and I'm going to set a align self to center. So saving all of this and going back inside my website, you can see that if I were to refresh, we now have all the social media links over here on the right side, and we have everything going on over here on the left side. So everything is working out perfectly fine. Now we do need to do one more thing in here to actually fix the dropdown issue. So if we were to zoom in here, just so everything is a little bit bigger now. Right now, if I were to go inside this dropdown, you can see it's not actually placed correctly inside the gallery. We do need to go inside at the top here. Let me just go ahead and scroll all the way up to where we have our navigation. So right now you can see we have our header-main, and right between our header-main UL and header-main and then the anchor tag styling, I'm going to add in a styling for the list item. So the list item we have down here, just so we have, the in-between styling here. I'm going to go ahead and set a position set to relative, which is not really going to do anything to the list item other than making sure that the dropdown is actually going to be able to position itself using the position absolute attribute. Because right now, the reason that our dropdown is not placed directly under the gallery is because it's not actually registering the gallery using the position absolute. But by adding a position relative to our list item here, it is actually going to register it now. So when I refresh it, you can see that now it goes right underneath here. But you may have noticed that we have another issue now, because all the text here is kind of like wrapping below each other, which is really weird, right? We don't want this to be like below each other. And that's because it's fitting to the width of my list item. So I do want to make sure that all this is not wrapping, but actually going next to each other. And the way we can do that, because remember, we did actually comment something out here called white dash space no wrap. So if we were to actually uncomment this, so you can actually see what this does. Going back inside the website, you can now see that when I refresh the browser, everything is fixed. So basically it's telling it that we cannot wrap the text inside this drop down here. So it has to be, next to each other and not wrap down to the next line. So now we have everything in order to get this working inside the browser version. Like everything is fitting accordingly. We have a drop down and we have a menu. I do want to point out here that the actual social media icons are actually not linking anywhere, because when we go back inside our HTML here, you'll actually notice that we do have images, but they're not linking to anywhere. So I could basically go in and, add a anchor tag styling if I wanted to do that and just wrap it around here. So now we have a anchor tag and it's wrapped around. And if we were to go and do this, I can just go ahead and, for now it's just a placeholder. So I can just go ahead and say hashtag. Do the same thing for the other image down here, just so we have an anchor tag. And of course, we do need to be aware that we're not closing the anchor tag right after opening it here, because I did accidentally do that. So open the anchor tag, then the image, and then close the anchor tag, okay? So we're going to save it here, go back inside the website, refresh, and then you can see things just kind of like shifted a little bit there. We will go in and fix that in just a second. But now we can actually click these, so they actually take me somewhere inside the website. So going back inside the styling, let's just go ahead and copy the social media links here, paste it below, and say we want to target the anchor tag inside of the social media links. Then I'm going to copy all the styling from the image tag down here, paste that in, and say I also want to add a display block to make sure that we can actually add a height to it. And then I want to make sure that we go inside the image tag and set a height set to 100%. So doing this little change here should, I haven't tested it, but it should fix everything. So going in here, you can see everything shifted back again and everything is working fine. So now we have everything for the desktop version of the website. And now we need to get started on the responsive version. So what I'm going to do inside my style sheet at the very bottom is I'm going to add in a media query. So if you know a little bit about responsive design, we basically go in and add a media query where we say that, okay, if the screen is a certain size, then I want to make sure that everything styling wise changes inside this website here. So what I want to do is I want to say that I have a media only, which has a screen and max width as 600 pixels, which means that if the screen is a certain width, so right now maximum 600 pixels, then apply a different styling to the website. Now all we need to do is go inside and start changing the styling that needs to change when we go inside a mobile format. So the way we need to do that is by going back inside our website, click F12, go inside our responsive design mode, which is the little, the mobile icon that we have up here. if we were to click it, make sure you have the right mobile version selected. So right now it shows the iPhone 12/13. You can just pick anything basically in here as long as it's not like an iPad or something. So if you were to pick that, you can see now it looks like this inside the website, which is not really what we're looking for. Do just refresh just to make sure everything looks properly. But now you can see that everything looks weird. Like we have this going on here. It's just not fitting like I want it to. So the first thing I want to do is go back inside my index page and actually add in another piece of HTML, which is going to be the actual burger menu, which is going to be in the top corner. So I'm going to add in a div container. I'm just going to copy paste it here, and you can just like copy it because it's super tiny, the amount that we're going to add in. So by adding in this little blocker code here, so we have a div container that has a class set to mobile-menu-button, and I'm going to link to a image, which is going to be my burger menu inside my image folder. That is all I'm doing here. So by saving this, we now have a burger menu inside the website. So going back in, you might not be able to see it, but there is kind of like a dark image here of a burger menu, which is the one I just added in. Of course, it's like way too big and it has to be resized and everything, but that is something we're going to fix right now. Just to kind of show it here, because if I were to go back inside my desktop version now, the burger menu is here. It is right here. You may not be able to see it again because it's kind of dark, but it is right here, and it's just kind of in the way. Like it's not supposed to be here on the desktop version, right? So let's fix that really quick. So by going inside of my style sheet at the very top here, so right after let's say right after the body styling here, I'm just going to add in a display none for my mobile menu button. So I'm just going to add that in here, and then you can see that going back inside my website, we no longer have this image here. So now everything is normal again. So now we can get started on styling the actual responsiveness. So of course we'll have to go in, we'll have to go back inside device mode, and then we have our mobile version of the website right here. Inside the media query at the very bottom here, I'm going to go in and target my header-main and say I want to set a display as none, because when I do that and go back inside my mobile version, you'll notice that my header is being hidden, because when I'm inside the mobile site of my website, I don't want to have the menu actually shown unless I click the burger menu at the top corner. So to begin with, we're just going to go and set this one to hidden or none, so to speak. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to style this little burger menu button. So I'm just going to add in the styling for that. So you can see we have the mobile-menu-button. I set it as a display flex. I set justify content to center to make sure that everything, the image inside this mobile burger menu container is being centered. I set a width and a height to 60 pixels. I set the position to position absolute to make sure I could place it in the top right corner of my website. So right now you can see we set it to top and right as 0. I do also want to make sure this button here is always going to be on the top of my website, so it's not hidden behind something when we start scrolling. So setting a set index to 200 is very necessary. And I did also include a background color as white. So now if I were to go back inside my website here, you can see we get this little button up here. Now I do think the image inside of here is a little bit weird, so let's go ahead and style that a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll set a height to 80% instead, so it's not 100%, and also a align self to center. Otherwise, when I start changing the height, it's going to not be centered inside this container here. So going back inside my website, you can now see that it's a little bit smaller and just looks a little bit nicer. So now right now, I do actually want to go in and just do some temporary styling here so we can actually see what is going on, because we do need to see the actual menu so in order to actually style it, because right now we set it to display none, so we can't actually see it. So let's actually go ahead and say we want to comment this out for now, because I do need to see everything. And I'm also going to comment out everything when it comes to this mobile menu here. So let's actually go ahead and comment everything out, just to make sure we can see the menu again. So going back inside the website, for now, let's go ahead and make sure we can see the actual menu or the header inside the website. So doing that, so we can now actually style it and see what is going on, I'm going to add the next styling, which is going to be the header-main. Now, all I'm doing in here is I'm making sure to add a flex property to this menu, which is going to be wrapping in a different direction. So because right now we already added in a flex styling, if I were to go back up to my desktop version here, you can see my header-main has a flex displayed down here. And all the styling, which is inside the desktop version, is going to carry into the mobile version, as you may have noticed, because if I were to open up the website here, it still looks like my desktop version. It just can't fit inside the mobile version. So all this styling is still being applied from the desktop version, but we just need to alter it now, basically. So going back down inside my mobile version, you can see that right now I'm just basically saying that I want to have a different height. So instead of having a 60 pixel height, I want to have a 100 view height. So it actually fits inside my device. And then I also want to have a flex wrap set to wrap to make sure that everything wraps down to the next line if there's no space for it horizontally. And I do also want to make sure everything is being displayed column wise instead of being displayed inside a line or inside a row. So that is something I added in as well. I did also add a padding to 0 because right now we have a padding of, I do believe, 60 pixels on the side, on the left and right. So just to make sure to reset everything, this is set to 0. And I did also add a justify content to make sure that everything started from the beginning. Otherwise, everything is going to be centered inside this particular menu here. So adding this in, we can already see that things are changing a little bit here. So if we were to refresh it, you can see that now my header is taking up the entire space inside this website here, because do remember, we still have the width set to 100% from the desktop version styling, and now we're just setting a different height, basically. So now what I want to do is I want to go in and start styling all the individual elements inside my header here. So I'm going to start by styling the navigation element, and just change and alter the styling from the desktop version. So we're setting a width to 100% now. I'm also setting a height to 80 view height. Basically, I'm giving the navigation 80%, and then I will go down and give the social media the last 20%. And we'll do that a little bit later inside the styling here. But it's just a way for us to evenly divide up the content inside my mobile phone here to make sure everything fits inside of it. I went ahead and gave this one a flex wrap set to wrap and also set to column to again make sure that everything is wrapping down if there's no space for it and going downwards instead of going inside a row here. And then I did also say to align content and set it to stretch, which basically means that everything is stretching to make sure it takes up the space that it needs to take up in here. So by saving it, going back inside the website, you can now see that things are starting to change a little bit. Again, it still doesn't look quite right because the actual items inside the navigation is not being styled. So let's do that next. Let's start by styling the logo to make sure it actually fits in here. So what I'll do is I'll add in a logo styling and changing how that is going to be styled. I'll set a height to 30% and set a padding and a margin to 0, as well as setting this one to display flex and then align item center. And this is basically to make sure that this logo container is actually centering the image inside of it, because right now inside the index page, you can see that we did actually include a anchor tag that has a logo inside of it as an actual image. So we're right now styling the anchor tag and then saying to center the image inside the anchor tag. So going back inside our style sheet, we do actually need to style the actual image to make sure it's not taking up 100%. So let's go in here and say that the height is going to be 60% of this anchor tag here, and also set it to align self to center to make sure it is centered inside this anchor tag. Because remember, we do have a vertical and a horizontal axis. So one of these is going to center for the vertical and the other one is going to center for the horizontal. So basically that's what we're doing here. We can actually go ahead and remove this cursor here because I don't think we actually need it, and save everything. Going back inside our website, refresh it, and then you can see we have this image up here. But now, of course, everything is still looking kind of messy because we haven't actually styled the rest of the navigation. So let's just go ahead and continue here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to style the actual menu. So let's go ahead and target the unordered list to start with and say that we want to set a height to 70%. Why, you may be asking? That is simply because we set the height of the logo container to 30%. So 70 plus 30 is equal to 100%. So basically, the logo is taking up 30% of my entire navigation, and the the unordered list is taking up the rest of it. So the majority of the space here. I did also went ahead and set a width to 100% to make sure it goes all the way to the left and right, as well as setting a padding to 0 and a margin to 0 to reset everything. And then of course, again, I just went in and set a wrap and a column to make sure that everything wraps down to the next line if there's no space for it, and to make sure it's actually going in a column direction instead of a row direction. And then I set the align content to space between to make sure that everything is just like, split out, so to speak. So saving everything and just checking how things look like, you can see that now we start getting something that looks a little bit better. So now we have the logo centered, and because we set everything to wrap and then go down in a column, you can see that things are going below here. So now we need to style the actual anchor tags, because right now you can see the unordered list is going below, but the actual menu items are not actually styled to a mobile format. So that's what we're going to do next. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and actually style the list items. So right now you can see here that if we were to wrap everything so we can see it, we right now have a width set to 100% to make sure the list item is going all the way across. I did also do a little bit of a calculation here, which I do need to explain in just a second. We set a padding and a margin to 0 to reset everything. I did also went ahead and gave them all a border top to make sure that we had just a little bit of an indicator. So like, when does the next menu item actually start? Then I also went ahead and gave it a display flex to make sure that, and again, you can actually see that this is part of my comments that I have inside my lesson material here for, if people want to download my lesson material, then it's full of comments. But basically we're just setting a flex here so we can set a little bit of wrapping, and again, set it as a column, justify content to the center to make sure everything shifts into the center instead. And I did also add in a transition to make sure that when I hover my mouse cursor on top of these list items, to make sure they have a hover effect going on that has a little bit of smoothness to it. So again, we're just basically displaying everything as a flex and then saying they need to go in a column and make sure they're centered inside this column here and everything. But there is one issue here. If I were to actually save this and go back inside my website, you can actually see that we do have this border that I talked about, but we do not have a border underneath my contact, because there needs to be something separating my contact button from the search field and everything else that I have down below here. So what I'll do is I'll go in and add a styling just for the last list item inside this menu. And the way you can do that is by going in and saying that you want to target the last child of this particular, list of list items that we have here, and give it a border bottom to 1 pixel. So if I do that, go back in, refresh, you can now see that I have a border at the bottom here. Now, I did say I was going to explain this up here, and I will do that right now. So basically right now we have a bunch of menu items, and I do have 5 items right now, because remember, at the top up here, we did actually set a root where I set a variable equal to 5. And that is because right now I have 5 menu list items. I have 2 here and 3 down here, not counting the drop down. And because of that, if you want to, and go inside your website, not mine here, but if you have another website where you're kind of like watching this tutorial here and you want to add in a 6th menu item, then you do need to go inside and change this to 6, right? And the reason for that is inside my styling at the bottom here, I'm basically going inside the height of these list items because they need to fit inside the navigation here. And I'm saying I'm taking 100% of the height and dividing it by 5 in order to take these list items and give them a height that is 1/5 of the height available inside this container. So if you have 6 list items, they're going to be 1/6 of the height inside of this container here. So basically they're going to readjust in height and make sure they fit inside your mobile menu container. So everything is going to be kind of like responsive in a sort of sense. Responsive is not the right word. Flexible. So if you want to add less or more menu items inside your particular website here, just go ahead and do that and then change the number inside the variable at the top of our style sheet, and everything should fit accordingly. So having done this, the next thing we need to add in is a little bit of styling for the actual anchor tags. And basically what I'm just doing here is setting a width to 100% and saying that the height should fit the content, because right now we did actually go in and say that we want to, change things when it came to the height according to, how many menu items did we have and so on. So in order for that to work properly, we're going to set a height to fit content. I'm resetting the padding and the margin. I'm also saying that the text needs to be aligned to the center, so it's centered inside my screen. And also I'm going to make sure to add the font size as something else, because the text is quite small right now. if we were to go back in, you can see we can't really see it on a mobile device. So we're just sort of like sizing it up a little bit there. But now before we go in and actually refresh the browser to see what we did here, I am going to add in a hover effect. And this is not to actually add a hover effect to this particular thing. This is actually to prevent the hover effect from happening, because right now inside the desktop version, if we were to scroll up here, you can see that I added in a hover effect where I set a background color to dark, and then the text is going to be light. And that is going to be kind of weird inside the mobile version when I start clicking it, because we don't want that to happen. So I'm basically just reverting the changes back so we don't actually have this going on. So going back down, I'm just basically saying, okay, don't do that. Don't add the hover effect. So saving this, I can now go back inside, refresh it, and then you can see everything looks really neat and tidy and everything is fitting. Let me just go ahead and demonstrate what I talked about when I said adding another menu item. So if we were to go inside of here, inside my index file, and say I want to add in a sixth menu item. So let's just say it's also going to be called contact. You could change it if you wanted to, but I'm just trying to demonstrate here. If I do that, go back inside my website, you can actually see that things are not going to look properly because it is disappearing below here. It is kind of like being cut off. So what I need to do is go back in and say that all these different menu items need to change to fit 6 different menu items. So going back in, refreshing, you can now see that it fits another one. So we have, space for another menu item. So that is really neat, I think. Of course, if you add in too many list items, of course, the text is kind of big and it's going to start, clipping into each other. So just adjust the text size of these different anchor tags here if you get that many list items. So let me just go ahead and revert back what we did here, just to, because I wanted to demonstrate, and go back in and refresh the browser to make sure everything fits. So the next thing I want to do is I actually want to go inside and enable scrolling, because when I do add in the dropdown may go, below the height of my device, because there might be a lot of drop down items. So to make sure we can actually go in and actually scroll to reach down to the other drop down items, I do need to make sure I go in and say that my header-main nav is going to have a scroll as well as overflow X hidden to make sure that we can scroll down, but not sideways, because we don't want to be able to scroll sideways inside a website, because that is kind of like weird. So we can scroll downwards, but we cannot scroll sideways. So now the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go inside my browser and disable touch simulation. I'm going to deactivate that to make sure that's not a thing. And then you can see, we can actually hover and things start changing because we do have a drop down that is working. I do want to make sure that this drop down is not actually loaded in unless I tell it to. And the way we're going to do that is we're actually going to hide away this drop down completely until I actually click on this drop down here. So to do that, I need to go below here. I'm basically going to go in and target the drop down and say that I want to display none, but I'm also going to add in the styling for when I actually enable it and show it inside the website when I click it. So basically we just need to have this, but I do want to make sure that when I actually set display to something else than none, so we can actually see it, that we have this styling here applied to make sure that this is actually applied to it. So basically we're saying that we want to hide it, to not show it inside the website, but I do also want to make sure that when we see it, we have a flex wrap set to no wrap. I do also want to set the direction to column so it goes downwards, so not in a row. I do also want to make sure it's set to position absolute to make sure the dropdown is positioned in the right place, to make sure it's not like going off screen or something. So it is going to be inside my actual gallery list item. And then I do also want to say that I want to have a set index set to 2000 just to have a large number. You could also set this one to 1000 or something. It doesn't really matter. I just set a high number to make sure you could always see it. And I'm also going to set it to left as 0. So we could actually just, for order's sake, move it up here. So everything is, it's top and left and then the set index. So basically this is just going to place it correctly inside my screen here. The reason we're adding in the left, by the way, is because you may remember if I go up here inside my styling, if I go inside my dropdown, so you can see it starts right here inside the desktop version, I did actually set a left to -40. The reason I did that, just to kind of show it, if I were to actually delete it here, if I were to go back inside my desktop version, just to kind of show this, if I did not set this one to -40, you're going to notice that it is going to go a little bit to the right side. So setting it to -40 is just going to shift it over a little bit. And that's basically what I did here when I added in -40 inside the desktop version. So that is why we have it set to -40, by the way. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm going inside the mobile version and saying that, okay, so remember that -40 we set up there? Let's not have that be a thing anymore. Otherwise it's going to go outside the screen 40 pixels. So adding this in is very important. Let's go back inside the mobile version here just so we can see everything. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and add in the styling for the list item that is inside the dropdown. And of course, right now we can't actually see the dropdown because we set it to display none, just to kind of like show how that looks like. If we were to refresh it here, you can see that there's no dropdown appearing now because I did actually say to display none. So it's not actually visible in here. You can also see if I right click and go inside inspect, you can see that it's grayed out here because I set it to display none. So it's down there, you know, we can't see it, but I do still want to go in and actually style the list items inside of here for when I start showing the actual drop down so we can actually, you know, see it. We can go in if you wanted to and set this one to flex for now, you know, just temporarily, to see what is going on in here when we start styling the list item, because right now we can't actually see what is going on. So if I delete it again, just to show you, you can see that now it looks like this after we added all the other styling to it, but it's not actually shown below each other, which is kind of like weird. So let's actually go ahead and change that. So if I go in, add in the list item styling here to make sure that the height fits the content, everything is displayed as a block item to make sure we can actually adjust the height of it, and also changing the background color to dark. If I do that, go back inside, refresh, you can now see that everything is kind of like it is appearing, and I can go down, but the styling is not quite right. I am changing the background color when I select something in here, but I do want all of them to be permanently dark with a white text color. So that's what we need to do next now. So to do that, we're just going to target not the list item, but the actual anchor tag inside the list item. And I'm just basically saying, okay, always have a dark background color with a white text. If I do that, go back inside the browser, refresh, you can now see it looks like this. And of course, there's still some weirdness going on here when we actually hover. It is kind of like hiding the text. So we do also need to change that. So to change that, we basically go in and change the hover of the anchor tag. So I'm saying when I hover on top of this anchor tag here, go ahead and make the background color dark and the color of the text white, so to speak. So doing that, now everything should be fixed. So it looks like this. But we do have an issue here because I want to demonstrate what happens if you have so many drop-down items that it goes below the device height, basically. Because what if you have like, you know, not just 5 drop-down items, but let's say you have like 10. What do you do then? So let's go ahead and go back inside the index page just for now to like try and break the website a little bit just to demonstrate some things here. Let's say I don't have 5 drop-down, but I have 10. What is going to happen inside my website here? So if I do that, you can see, oh, it's actually going below, but hey, we can actually scroll. And that is what we added in with the scroll on the y-axis in order to actually scroll down. But we do also have another issue, because you may have noticed here, when I don't have the drop-down selected, I can still scroll. We have some white space going on down here now. And the reason for that is when I always have my drop-down loaded in, even though it's not actually clicked right now, it is still loaded in. So the website is still registering it as being there. So therefore there needs to be room for it. So therefore we can scroll to make sure there's room for it when it actually gets activated. And that's why when I go inside my styling and go above here, we don't have the display set to flex, but actually as none. Because when I don't hover on top of it, I don't want it to be registered inside the website. So by doing this, going back inside, now you can see we can no longer scroll, which is a good thing, until I actually click it and activate it. And that's what we need to do in just a second. So going back inside the style sheet, now I want to make sure that when I actually go in and I actually activate this menu, that we actually have it shown inside the browser. So when I go in and I hover on top of this menu, then the unordered list needs to be activated. Or when I focus it, it also needs to be activated. So basically you can see here that I'm targeting the focus as well as the hover and saying that both of these needs to have this styling down here. And I'm saying that I want to change it from display none to display flex when I actually hover on top of it and try to activate it. I do also set a visibility set to visible and a opacity to 1. And the reason for that is that we want to make sure that this works inside Firefox. There's a little bit of a difference between using Chrome and Firefox, and if you were to not have these two lines of code here, this will still work inside Chrome. But inside Firefox and some other browsers, most likely, you do need these two lines of code here for it to work properly, so just make sure you add this in here. So if I were to go back inside now, refresh the browser, you can now see that when I hover, it actually pops up here. So when I go in and activate it, it is going to be, in here, so we can actually choose something. So now we have a menu, which is a drop-down that is actually working inside the browser. And I do want to point out here that, of course, there's many ways to create a drop-down inside a mobile version. It could be a new menu that pops up on the screen or something and takes up 100% of the height and the width. But because I know people didn't want too much JavaScript involved in this lesson here, this is how I decided to make it, to make sure that you could actually go in and use this. So the next thing we're going to do is we're not going to be styling the drop down anymore. I'm actually going to go down and I'm going to start styling the social media part at the bottom of my mobile version. So I'm going to say that I want to target my social media container, which is in here. And I want to set a width to 100% to make sure it goes all the way across, and a height to 20 view height. And the reason for that is that if I were to go up inside my navigation styling here, there we go. So the mobile version of the navigation styling has a height set to 80 view height. So when you take 80, how much is left? Well, we have 20, because 80 to 100 is going to be 20 left over, right? So the last one down here needs to be 20 view height in order to fit the screen perfectly inside our styling here. I did also went ahead and reset the margin and the padding to 0 just to make sure there's nothing messing up here. I may have overdone a little bit with the margins and the paddings. I just want to point that out in this lesson here because we probably don't need this in every single place. But honestly, I just like to reset things inside my styling. So I just added it in here. I did also went ahead and change the flex wrapping and the direction. So we have everything going below each other to make sure the form and the social media links in there are actually going below each other, not next to each other. So by saving this and going back inside the website, you can now see that things are going below each other, which is really good. So now we need to change the actual appearance of these different items. So the first one I'm going to style here is going to be the form. So I'm going to add in the form styling and say I want to add a padding right to 0 because we need to reset the padding of the form because I added, I think, 5 pixels of styling inside the desktop version. So just to reset everything to make sure there's no weird spacing going on the sides here, I just reset it. We did also set a width to 90% to make sure it doesn't go all the way to the edges of the screen. And I also set a height to 40% to make sure it's not going, all the way, or it has a weird, small height or something, just to make sure it fits correctly inside my website. So if we were to save this, go back in, you can actually see that now it looks something like this because I adjusted the height accordingly and make sure the width was according. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to style the inputs inside the form to make sure it fits again according to the mobile version. I just basically set a width and a height to 100%. I did also change the padding a little bit to make sure that it fit inside the mobile version. And then I changed the font size to again fit inside the mobile version just to make sure it looked a little bit bigger. So going back in, you can see that the text in here is kind of tiny. If I refresh it, everything looks a little bit bigger. So going back inside my styling, the next thing I'm going to do is style the button. And I'm going to do that by simply going in and saying I want to target the button. I'm just going to change how the padding is going to work for the button here to make sure it fits a little bit better inside what we did here. I'm also going to style the image inside the button because remember, we did actually add an image inside our search field for when you click search. And I do want to make sure that is also fitting to the mobile version. So again, just giving it a height and a padding. Just to make sure that when we go in here, you can see the button over here is actually going to fit a little bit better inside the container here. And the last two pieces of styling that we need in order to get everything working when it comes to the HTML and CSS part is going to be changing the social media links. So going down below here, I'm going to add in the styling for the social media links container. So as you can see, I'm basically just giving it a height as 50%. I'm also saying that the width needs to be 100% to make sure it goes all the way across. I'm resetting the margin and the padding. And then I'm saying to justify content to the center to make sure everything is centered inside of here. Then I want to target the actual link items in here. And we did actually go in and change things a little bit because, we did wrap some anchor tags around it. So my, styling on the side here is not going to fit entirely 100%. So let's make sure we target the anchor tag and not the image tag inside of here So we're basically just changing the height, the margins, and the paddings in order to fit the images correctly inside of here. And you can always, mess around with it if you want to change it a little bit more, change the size of the images or something like that. But basically, this is just going in and making sure that everything is centered. And that is all we need for the HTML and the CSS part. Now what we need to do in order to get this working 100% is to make sure that when I actually go inside the mobile version and refresh the browser, and this is like what we loaded up for the first time, is we don't want to have the menu open. Like we need to click a button in order to open this menu here. So the way to do that is by going inside our styling, going down to the mobile version. And you may have noticed that we did actually add some comments here because I started hiding this styling since we needed to be able to see the menu inside the mobile version. But in actuality, this is what we need to see. So if we go back in, this is what we need to see the first time we go in here. So using JavaScript, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we can actually see and hide this menu when we click this button up here. So what I'll do is I'll go inside my website root folder and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this one JS for JavaScript. And inside this folder, I'm going to create a JavaScript file. So I'm just going to say I want to include a new file. And this one is going to be called mobile-nav.js. And inside of this file here, we're going to have all the different JavaScript code just in order to get this little simple mechanic working in order to show the menu and that kind of thing. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a variable. So I'm going to create a let type variable and call this one header main. And this is basically just for grabbing our header right now, because right now the header is hidden inside our website. So I want to grab the header so we can actually toggle the styling for it being hidden and showing it. So in order to grab it, I'm going to set it equal to document.query selector. And then I want to go in and actually select our header dash main. So I'm going to say I'm going to grab a element with a class called header dash main. Then I'm going to duplicate this and say I don't want to grab the header main, but I want to grab the header mobile button. So header mobile button. And in this case, we're not grabbing the header main, but I'm actually grabbing the mobile menu button, because that is what we need to grab here. And let me just go ahead and make sure we wrap everything. So if it like cuts off the end of my screen here, you can just like see it on the next line. So basically, we're grabbing the button so we can actually say when I click this button, then I want something to happen. So in order to do that, we need to say, okay, so which button are we referring to here? So this is the mobile menu button that we have inside our website, which is the little burger menu up there. Then what I want to do is I want to create another variable, and I'm going to call this one is menu open. And this is simply for checking if the menu right now is open inside my website. So right now, because it's not open, I'm going to set this one to false to begin with. And then I'm going to go and add a onClick event for this particular button that we grabbed up here. So right now we grabbed the menu button. So I'm going to refer to it and say when I have a onClick event happening to this button here. So we're going to say onClick. Then I'm going to set it equal to a function where I'm going to run a block of code. So we're going to say we have a function, and we're going to run a bunch of code when we click this button inside our website. So I'm going to run a if statement or an if condition to check if the menu right now is open or closed. Because if it's open right now, then I need to run one block of code. But if it's closed, then I need to run a different block of code. So basically, having two blocks of code here that is going to run depending on the status of our current menu. So the first thing we're going to check is whether or not the menu is not open. So right now, if it's equal to false, by adding this exclamation mark here, that basically means is it equal to false? We could also have done this right here if I wanted to, but the easier way to do it is just by adding a exclamation mark. So that is the pro way of doing things in code. So I'm going to grab the header main, copy it, paste it in, and say I want to grab the header main and change something about it. In this case, it's going to be the styling. So we're going to say style dot, whoops, don't do that, dot display, which is basically us grabbing the display styling inside the CSS and setting it to something different. And in this case, if we don't want to have it none, because that is what it is right now, but I want to set it to flex. Then I want to go below here and say I want to change the menu status, because right now we opened the menu, and I want to change this one to true, because now the menu is open. Then I'm going to go below here, create a if else statement. Actually, it's going to be else if. Then we're going to go in and check if the menu is right now open. And if it is, when we click this button here, then I want to, instead of setting it to display flex, I want it to be set to display none. So we're just basically changing the value here. So display none. And then I want to make sure that we set the menu status to false. And that is all the JavaScript we need to have. So going back inside our index file, we need to make sure we actually load in this file. Otherwise, it's not going to be working. So at the very bottom here, I'm going to go down right below my body tag. And I'm going to say I want to add in a script. So this is going to be a script. And the source for this script is going to be inside my JS folder. So we have a JavaScript folder. And then the mobile-nav.js. Saving this. Going back inside my website, you can now see that when I refresh it and click the button, we now open the menu. And then when I click it again, we close it. And with all that, this is how you can create a responsive menu with a search field and a drop-down menu and, a logo and different things. I hope you enjoyed this lesson here. And, I hope I explained everything thoroughly when it came to, explaining the drop-down properly and, just the styling in general, because I tried something new out where I pasted in the code and then told you what it did instead of like explaining it one by one. But I kind of feel like I did explain things one by one as I pasted it in. I don't know. I hope it wasn't confusing. That's what I'm trying to say. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed and I'll see you guys next time.